Right, so this is the Pixel 7a. It is quite an impressive smartphone considering its lower $499 price tag. Unfortunately, there are some flaws and we will talk about that. But first, let's take a moment to cover the 5 pillars of a great smartphone. Starting with the display.
We all know that Google hasn't always been upfront, on the forefront of technology, fighting for the latest stuff. No. In fact, when it comes to their hardware, I'd say Google has taken 2 steps back from the rest of their competition and decided, you know what, let's run on what's the most reliable. So, with the Pixel 7a, you have all the standard specs. It is a 1080p display, so that's standard. That's, what a regular smartphone display's resolution would be. This year, they've actually made the upgrade to 90 Hertz, which is actually, just, 50% more frames than 60 Hertz. But I'd say when using the Pixel 7a, okay, by standard, it comes 60 Hertz. But if you go into the settings and you turn on smooth display, you will feel a noticeable bump in smoothness and quality, because simply 90 Hertz is those 50% more frames that just make the experience more smooth, less jittery. And hell, now that I've used 90 Hertz, I've been absolutely spoiled because I can't go back to 60 Hertz without noticing a major change. Other than that, it's the standard stuff. It's a HDR panel. The hole punch in the display isn't much of an interruption. Just maybe when watching actual full screen content, it's gonna be slightly noticeable, but other than that, it's just standard stuff, not very noticeable at all. Right, so one of the other things is this Pixel 7a has an in-display fingerprint sensor. Now, personally, I have tried in-display fingerprint sensors before, and some were finicky, some were not. And here on the Pixel 7a, even though it's using an optical sensor, which in theory is slower, it's still decently fast enough for me to unlock my phone and boom, I'm in, alright? So it's not as sluggish as people like MKBHD say it is, but it's not the fastest. There's also the option for face unlock, but in my testing, I rarely even use the face unlock because it was just not good. Like, if you go into medium dim lighting, it's not gonna work at all because it's just using the standard RGB camera on the front of the display. When it comes to the build quality of the 7a, however, you might notice some things. So comparing it against the Pixel 7, it's obvious. The visor on the back, that Geordie LaForge looking thing, it's a plastic backplate, which is actually better for the phone considering, if you're running it caseless and you drop it, it's not gonna be like super cracked. And especially I know, how phones are like usually very crack resistant nowadays. I still don't trust myself enough. So plastic is kind of my choice. And it's not any less premium either. Other than that, it has an aluminium frame. So, it's metal and it feels pretty premium in the hands and, doesn't feel wrong. It has a decent weight to it, so it still feels premium. In fact, it's just like a couple grams off from the Pixel 7. Okay, one of the things that's different on the Pixel 7a compared to the 4a that I came from was the lack of a headphone jack. So on this phone, you won't get a headphone jack, but that's been pretty standard for years. Now even the mid-range phones are feeling the lack of a headphone jack, so that's that. On the front, the display is protected with Gorilla Glass 3, so it's not the high standard Gorilla Glass 5 or 6 or Victus, or, Victus 2. But it's still decently protected because Gorilla Glass 3, frankly, is good enough. Right, now going on to the battery. The battery on this phone is pretty good. So it's a 4385 milliamp hour battery. So that's, you know, just less than 5000 milliamp hours, which some other mid-rangers in this price bracket are starting to offer nowadays, but it's still incredibly functional. The 7A actually improves one thing against the 6A, which is the inclusion of wireless charging. So this has 7.5 watts of wireless charging, so it's not the fastest, but it's enough for a trickle charge like overnight, or maybe you're in your car navigating. So in my testing, I have actually put this through two different scenarios. So the first scenario was actually using it on Android 13. I did that for a while, and it was decently good at what it did. Uh, while it was running Android 13, I actually got about 3 to 4 hours of screen on time, which is okay. With the Android 14 and the December feature drop, let's just say the phone took battery and pumped it up to 11, because this phone has been so reliable for me that in a standard day of use, it could get 5 to 6 hours of screen on time based on how much I would use the phone. Of course, if I ever played Genshin on it, it would drop to like 3 or 4 hours of screen on time. But that's because Genshin is just the single most power hungry game ever to exist. Now, on to my favorite part of this video, talking about the cameras, because honestly, I'm a bit of a camera freak. The main sensor here is an upgraded 64 megapixel main sensor with optical image stabilization, and it actually kicks out a decent result. Shutter lag doesn't really exist, so what you'll be able to snap is what you see in that moment. The video is supported up to 4K 60 frames per second, but only 30 frames per second if you run the speech enhancement. It also comes with a 13 megapixel ultra wide at f2.2. This is, a standard ultra wide camera. It's decently high res. It has a bit of distortion around the corners. It's a bit more noticeable on the 7A compared to some of the other ultra wides that I've touched upon. But it's still a very functional camera. You can get some very artistic shots on it. So that's pretty decent. It is kept at 4K 30 FPS though. So moving on to the selfie camera. Quite possibly my least favorite camera on this phone. So it's 13 megapixels, but the sensor is incredibly small. So I don't suggest using the selfie camera for anything other than like video calls or, just the standard selfie shot. It can record 4K 30 FPS, but it's not the best. It's not even the best selfie camera. It's just decent, it's functional, it works. It's a selfie camera. Come on. Right, so other than that, the phone supports two SIMs. So it's one nano SIM and one eSIM. And I've actually just loaded it up with one SIM for Singapore and one eSIM for Malaysia, because those are the two countries that I frequent the most. Some of the other stuff include all the AI smarts, so things like portrait mode, the Google Assistant, which I've used quite a lot to control this air purifier to my side, and it has been great. The Google Assistant is so smooth on this. Right, so of course, with so many positives, there are bound to be negatives. One of them is actually, things with heat. So you've seen the complaints of people saying, oh, Tensor G2 overheats a lot. And sure, that's a genuine problem that Google does have to solve on their end. But in my experience, and of course your mileage may vary, in my experience, Tensor G2 has only heated up when I'm doing heavy workloads on it. So for example, when I'm editing videos on CapCut, or when I'm playing Genshin Impact or Call of Duty, or when I'm filming videos, yes, it does heat up. Especially in a hot and humid country like Singapore. It's hot as hell, right? But other than that, there's not much of overheating issues. it doesn't really overheat. It just kind of gets a bit hot and toasty in the hands. Yeah, other than that, this phone is $499. You can probably already find it for $399, especially nowadays with all the flash sales and everything. Other than that, not much else for me to say. So, I'll see you guys in the next one. Have fun.